I made myself into a monster, and I battered anybody that came anywhere near me. It was just massive displacement. Been abused at the age of 11, that's not going to happen again. So I built this armory. All of my armory's in the books now, but all of the war paint, you know, all my body's filled with war paint. A huge back, big back, you know, wings. Don't come near me, I'm fucking dangerous. Actually, I was just an insecure, frightened boy stuck in the carapace of this martial arts legend. I wasn't a legend. This martial arts master, I wasn't a master. I was a frightened boy inside this physical frame. The only way I was going to clean that, Brian, was to write about it. I thought my wife would be ashamed of me. She actually said to me, yeah, but these things you've written here, they didn't happen to you, did they? You didn't do that to yourself. And I said, yeah, but I did. And that's the whole idea of writing the plays. I said, it's blackmailing me. You don't remember me. And he just looked up. He's a big guy. And I said, when I was a boy, you sexually abused me. And he went to stand up and I said, sit down. You need to know I forgive you. And I went to walk away and he stood up and he put his hand out and he was trembling like that. And that was the very, very beginning of my repair, my healing, my return back home.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Geoff Thompson, the British author, filmmaker, BAFTA-winning screenwriter, and martial arts expert. You were an early pioneer of street fighting techniques for self-defense, becoming a lead instructor for Chuck Norris in Las Vegas, and holding black belts in karate, judo, and aikido. Your first book, Watch My Back, recounts your violent experiences as a nightclub bouncer for over a decade. This was later adapted into a stage play and made it into a BAFTA-nominated short film. You went on to write award-winning films for the actors Ray Winstone, James Cosmo, and Orlando Bloom, and choreographed a West End play. You've also written over 40 books, many of them Sunday Times bestsellers. Your latest, Notes from a Factory Floor, How I Got From There to Here, chronicles your journey from a Coventry bedsit to the hallowed halls of BAFTA Piccadilly. Geoff, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being so kind as well. I was just saying to you about that, you've always looked after me, and I'm really grateful. You always look after me.
Well, you know, you're worth looking after,
Thank
Geoff.
you.
I said to someone today, I said, this guy's a national treasure, and I think you are. I think you are, Geoff. And so people that don't know, you know, we've had quite a history. I think 8 years ago, we had you on the show for the first time back in the old studio.
Yeah.
And then I had you back on for a one-on-one maybe a year or two later. This is before the leather chairs and the dog and all that stuff. And so we've had some really deep, incredible conversations over the years. And I know you've been kind of, you know, gone underground for a while to create and do everything. And so I'm just really glad you're here. And
thank you. I'm very grateful for the invite.
Yeah, we got so much to talk about, the book and everything. You know, maybe kick off, you know, we were just talking outside about one of the films you wrote called Romans that's now really kind of finally been released in the States. And I think it was filmed maybe 3 years ago, stars Orlando Bloom. I got a chance to watch a screener of it about a year and a half ago, and it's super powerful. And, you know, it's amazing to see that, you know, getting a lot of exposure. I know Orlando's being talked about, but the movie, you know, it has a lot of parallels with your life. It's very autobiographical, and it's very deep, and it's very real. And I just watched one of your short films, Bouncer, and anybody can watch it on YouTube. It's 9 minutes long. I think it was the first film that you wrote and made.
My first film,
And again, you know, I'm living the life of a bouncer from Coventry, and I've never been to Coventry, and I'm from San Diego, California. And yet within the first 60 seconds, Geoff, it resonates as a real part of the human experience. And I felt the same way watching Romans, is that I only needed a few minutes and I was like, there's something real here. And people connect to that. And I guess I'm just wondering, how do you create something that immediately that resonates with people? You know, how are you able to write that way?
Well, you tell the truth. I remember when I was suffering with depression, when I was younger, I was married, got young children, very depressed, trying to read books and trying to find out what was wrong with me. You know, I was tortured by depression. I remember looking at books and reading things and thinking I need to find the truth, and none of them were giving me the truth. I was reading stuff and thinking, this isn't honest. They're not telling the truth here. I need someone to tell me why I feel like this, and they weren't doing it. And I remember thinking way back then, when I find the truth, I'm going to tell everybody. So when I eventually did go on the doors and confront my fears, and I built a pyramid of fears and climbed up it and became a bouncer. When I found the truth, I decided I'm going to write a book and I'm going to tell the whole truth. And I remember my elder brother, Ray, who was also a writer, he read the first draft of Watch My Back and he said to me, are you sure you want to release this? And I said, why? And he said, because you're so vulnerable in this. And I said, yeah, but what's the point of doing a book if I can't be vulnerable? Who's it going to help if I can't be vulnerable? I didn't realise, Brian, but I'd actually triggered on the secret to the tree of life. There's an old saying in Judaism that says, the master sets the table for the servant before he eats himself. In other words, if we want to know something, if we want to find something, find somebody that needs it more than us, and it will be given to you. So we receive in order to share. Now I did that by accident because I just thought there must be loads of kids out there who are suffering like me, waking up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat with their wife next to them in bed asleep, who you know can't help you, and your children next door, and you know you can't explain to them why you're so depressed. And the doctor who wants to give you pills because he doesn't know the answer either. And you are surrounded by people and nobody seems to want to help you, or they can't help you, or they either don't know the truth, or they can't articulate the truth, or they're too afraid to say the truth. So I had to have the courage to tell the truth. That's all I do, really. I pick up on the rhythm of Coventry is a very poetic city. I pick up on the rhythm. I love the dialogue. We spoke about it, and I love sound. The Japanese call it kotodamagaku, the use of magic sound. In Egyptology they call it heka, same thing, magic sound. So I picked up on that rhythm and recognised it wasn't just the words and just the truth, it was about the rhythm. The rhythm can be healing. I was talking to one of your lads out there, James, and he said he read Watch My Back in one sitting. It's 120,000 words, but it's because the rhythm is pleasing and it's easy and it's full of truth. But you know it's full of truth when you're scared to share it, when you're scared to give it out to somebody, when you're scared to let somebody read it, when you're scared to publish it, you know you've hit truth. And the truth means going inside yourself like a pin in a crab shell and pulling out the last vestments of sin or error or duplicity or fear, whatever it is that you're hiding from, whatever it is that's inside you, whatever parasite's in there, you find it, you pull it out, and you transfer that onto the page. You transfer the truth, and it becomes, you transferring the material into the spiritual. You transforming the dark into the light. So I was taking all of these fears, all of these depressions, all of these kind of conflicting, divided voices, and I was putting them onto the page. I was exposing them to light, and I was giving them life outside of me. I'll tell you a story that I've never told anybody. With Romans, I had a voice in my head. My tummy was playing up, my stomach was really bad, and I started to communicate with this element in me, or this elemental, and I said, what do you want? He says, you know what I want. I said, articulate what you want. I said, I can feel you in me. I can feel you there. What do you want? He said, I want life outside of you. I want life eternal outside of you. And I said, and how do you want that? He said, you know how I want it. And I said, you want me to write Romans? But I said, I've already written Romans 12:20. Then it clicked. There's a bigger story. Romans 12:20 was about a short version of Romans, which was about the conflict of a person that's been abused at the age of 11 and is displacing it violently at the age of 30 or 40. But there are other elements. It wanted me to talk about the relationship with people, why people deny that you've been abused because they're afraid of it. The police, maybe family, maybe friends, maybe this internal voice that says, you're getting a lot of mileage out of this, aren't you? And it wanted life outside of me. So I was working with Paul and Ludwig Shamazian, who, as you know, I love. They're visionary, and they wanted to give me notes. And I said, I don't want any notes. I don't need any notes. This element inside me knows what it wants to say, and I'm going to bring it out, and I'm going to say it. And I'm going to put in all the things that I'm afraid to put in, the things that I'm afraid for my wife to read, the things that I'm afraid for my agent to read, the things that I'm afraid to put out into the public. I'm going to put the whole lot down. I wanted to write about, not just about the grooming and the abuse, but the second abuse with, familial denial, and also, what's left inside you. When somebody abuses you, they don't just abuse you, they take something from you. They take a part of your soul and they replace it with a parasite. So even over space and time, they're feeding from you. So you think about somebody 20 years after they abused you, rushes of adrenaline, fear, anger. I mean, I went on the doors. I made myself into a monster and I battered anybody that came anywhere near me. It was just massive displacement. Been abused at the age of 11, that's not going to happen again. So I built this armory. It's not here now. It's all of my armory's in the books now, but all of the war paint, all my body's filled with war paint, a huge back, big back, wings. And I got rid of all the prettiness because I was a pretty boy. I got rid of the prettiness, got cauliflower ears and broken nose. Don't come near me, I'm fucking dangerous. Actually, I was just an insecure, frightened boy stuck in the carapace of this martial arts legend. I wasn't a legend. This martial arts master. I wasn't a master. I was a frightened boy inside this physical frame. The only way I was going to clean that, Brian, was to write about it and to say, you think I'm a tough guy or you think I'm this, but actually this is what I feel like inside. And I want to clean that. So the whole idea of writing the book was about telling the truth, so that if that book lands on if that, for instance, Notes from a Factory Floor lands in the hands of another young family man who's suffering with depression, who's cornered by depression, who's imprisoned by depression, he's going to read that and he's going to find himself. He's going to find something of himself, because there's nothing I've left out. Everything that happened to me, all of the terrible, wild imaginations, the possession, somebody abuses you, they leave a parasite in you, and even you can't even trust your own hands. Even your own hands abuse you. You lose your will. Your will is taken over. And the only way to get rid of that is to write it out, talk it out, put it into paper, give this element a life outside of you. So that's converted. I've converted what they would call in Judaism the evil inclination, the evil element within everybody. I've converted it into spiritual light or into information, and it's recorded in ink. So people can read that. And the sound waves, ironically, we were talking about sound out there, the sound will lift off the page and it will become subvocalization in them, and that will begin their healing process. Even if it just gives them information, even if it just gives them, I think they were in the Quran, they would call it a remedy. Some of the attributes of God are called remedies. So it gives you a remedy. So you read it and you just go, this is me. And there is hope. And this stuff that's blackmailing me, this stuff that's keeping me in my small terraced house, in this factory job, in this depression, actually, maybe it's not a harbinger of doom at all. Maybe it's a messenger of hope. Maybe I can turn into that, intercourse with it, absorb 99% of it, as Ushaba says, Maria Ushaba, the founder of Aikido, absorb 99% of it and convert it into something beautiful. So you said something to me when we came in, which is very kind. You're very prolific. That's all of the stuff I write, the films I make, they're my burnt offerings. That's my animal sacrifice. In the Old Testament, they talk about animal sacrifice, burnt offerings. It's an allegory. We sacrifice our animal soul. Our burnt offerings are all the things that blackmail us. We bring them out and we put them into the light, and we do it for one reason and one reason only, and this is the secret. We do it because we want to share it with other people, because we don't want other people to suffer. So whether you're talking about Buddhism or Judaism or Islam or Christianity or Sikhism or any of them, they all come to the same place. When we want to serve other people genuinely, when we genuinely want to serve other people, abundance comes down. Then it's our job to deliver that. So that's what and I love it. I do love the feeling. I mean, if I pick that book up now and I read the rhythm of the writing, I love it. And I can objectively tell you it's a great book because it's not mine. It's picked up all my flavours. It's picked up all my stories. It's picked up, my own rhythms, but it's not me. That's too good for me. I couldn't write that. What I had to do, Brian, was get in the way of that. I just had to get in the way of it. I had to wait for it to come, and I remember it coming, and believe me, I put that book off for years and years. I kept saying, I don't want to sit down and write that. Everyone kept saying, you should write a sequel to Watch My Back. I kept saying, I can't write that. There's so much to remember. I'll never get it in order. What I was really afraid was that I knew behind those stories was a treasure. But to get to that treasure, I had to dig past quite a few dead bodies. And nobody really wants to do that. But I did. I had an inspiration to sit down and write it. And I sat down for 8 weeks full time, never let nothing disturb me. And it came out, 150,000 words literally came through me. And if I had had more stamina, it would have come sooner. I just had enough stamina. I finished that. And I've been trying to write a book called The Divine CEO for a long time. I'd had 3 attempts, but it wasn't coming out. I just couldn't find it. I knew I needed to do it, but I couldn't find it. I wanted to write a book about creating a divine covenant. I finished that on the Friday, handwritten, and I said to my wife, the CEO's come, it's here, I can feel it. I went for a walk up Coombe Abbey, my local park, and 20 chapter headings downloaded into my head. I had to write them down before I lost them and send them to me as emails. I sat down on the Monday and I wrote for another 8 weeks, 150,000 words, and that was The Divine CEO. Again, another book that I had hardly anything to do with. It picked up my stories, it picked up my flavours. I have some delicious flavours. I have an Irish heritage. I've been around a few corners. So there's some nice stories, but the rhythm of it again is beautiful, and it's healing. It's a remedy, but it came through me. And what I've done with my life now is I've just got rid of everything so that I can make myself a vessel just to receive this work and put it down. But that doesn't mean it's easy, because it can feel like burnt offerings, animal sacrifice. Just by the nature of what I'm saying, you can tell it's painful.
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable to do.
I had a bit of a flashback there, Geoff, to 2 years ago when I decided to tell my story of heroin overdose and addiction. So, and for people to look at me, that's the last thing they would expect.
Yeah.
But when I was doing this Ironman race, it just came out, and there was the night before we were going to release this, and I had all this fear, and I was just like, how was everyone going to deal with it? And I hadn't told my wife for 16 years. I hadn't told anybody, Geoff. And then finally we released it, and because I knew it was the right thing to do, because it was going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it did. It was a wash of people with all the same stories and family members, and it just all came. But there was that moment where it was literally terrifying.
Yeah,
but
it really is. Yeah.
I'm sure the reason I did that probably was planted seeds. Maybe even some of your stuff.
Yeah.
Told me that it was going to be okay. So when
I think it's
that,
intercessionary, Brian. They call it intercessionary writing. So your work will go out there, your story. If you tell it from an honest place, which you do, and I do, then it'll act as an intercession in somebody's life. They will receive it at a specific time. That will, you've known yourself from your own stories that it can stop someone from committing suicide. It can stop someone from making the wrong decision. It can interrupt their life and take them on a completely new path. We had a lovely story about Romans, because I said to the lads, look, all we need to do with this, with Paul and Ludwig, I said, all we need to do with Romans is tell the truth. And we need to protect the truth. And when we put it out there, I can't tell Orlando that it's going to do well or that it's going to win awards. I've got no idea what this film wants to do, only that it's got its own soul, and that once we've done everything we can do, what was a lovely line from Pope Innocent said to St. Francis, he said, I expect you to do everything, no, he said, I only expect you to do what is possible, but you must do all of it. So I said, we've got to do everything we can possibly do, and then we've got to let go of it. What it does after that is not up to us. I said, but it will go out and it will work and it will touch people that we will never meet. We don't need to meet them. We just have to trust that the truth will go out and it will find its path. It ended up, I remember Rory Nolan, who's one of the actors in it, he was in Europe somewhere, I can't remember where it was, and he was there for a funeral, and he said, he was walking down the street and Romans was being premiered in this small town. So he went inside and he said, oh, I'm in this film. And they said, oh, well, do you want to come and present it? So he said, yeah. So he took his girlfriend's family with him and they all went and sat and watched this film. And they all, got a lot from it. It's a challenging film. He said they sat round afterwards, eating, and the mother of the family was saying, it's a good film, but, I don't think abuse goes on in the church like they say it goes on. I don't think that's really true. I think that's bit exaggerated. And her son at the other end of the table said, I was abused, Mum. And she said, what? This is in a room full of people. I was abused, Mum. What do you mean? He said, do you remember that priest you sent me to when I was depressed? Yeah. He sexually abused me. The film acted as an intercession for him. That was the first time he'd found the courage to reveal it. And his girlfriend went, a gasp. The mother, but she couldn't deny it anymore because it happened, and it's happened to so many people. And we're as sick as our secrets, aren't we? So this is the idea is that I don't need to know what the film does. I just need to know it's got the truth. Yeah. I know it's got the truth because, as you said, exactly the same as you. It wasn't just about writing the film. That was frightening enough. It was the thought that in 2 years' time, we're going to have to go over this and we're going to have to edit it and get it right, and then it's going to go out, and then people are going to want me to talk about it. They're going to want me to stand in front of a camera. They're going to want me to go on television. They want to ask me why I forgave this person. They're going to want to know the details of the abuse. They're going to want to, they're going to want to ask questions. And when they ask questions, it will be good for me because it will help me to reveal more little hidden parasites. But it's very frightening because you're just thinking, I don't want my mum to see that because I don't want my mum to be hurt. I don't want my family to be hurt by my revelations. These aren't, some of the detail of what I've written about in notes and in Romans, I've only just recently shared with my own wife. When I wrote Fragile, which was a stage play, which was a precursor to this, there was stuff in there that I had to tell my wife before we went in to watch it. This is what is going to be said, and I haven't told you this before because it was so secret. I didn't even know it was a secret, only that I was ashamed of it and that it was blackmailing me. So I decided I need to call its bluff and just say, okay, do your worst. If you want to blackmail me, come in, have a sit down. Here's my wife, here's my kids. Tell them everything. In fact, you don't need to tell them. I'm going to do a play. I'm going to put it in front of everyone in Coventry. Yeah. And this play, I nearly swore, but this play would not go on anywhere else. It wouldn't go on anywhere else. No one else would have it. And I said to the director, he was a West End director, Nick Bagnall, I said, I'm happy for this play to go on anywhere, but not Coventry. I can't have this on in Coventry, it will kill me. I said, the idea that my mum might see it, or the idea that my friend might stand in front of this, this play about, the sexual abuse, and then my own self-abuse and my own sexual self-abuse, and the detail of that, I said, I don't want that in Coventry. But Coventry was the only place it would go on. A guy called Hamish Glenn, who's the artistic director, said, we'll put it on. And I was like, oh, God.
It's exactly what you needed.
Yeah, it was all I needed.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying to God in my head, I kept talking to my highest self, I guess, just protect my mum. I don't want my mum to be battered by this. This isn't to do with my mum. This is to do with me articulating what happened and trying to find the truth. The truth was I was blaming everybody for what happened to me. wasn't conscious, but there was blame there. I was blaming my mum, I was blaming my dad, I was blaming the person that abused me, I was blaming the police, I was blaming society, I was blaming anybody that denied what happened to me. When I actually did the play and went through the layers, all I cared about, Ryan, all I cared about was protecting my mum. I love my mum. I just loved her. I felt love at the very core of this. I wasn't abandoned by anybody. I thought I was abandoned by God, by my very source. This is what Julian of Norwich said. We're not afraid of being abandoned by people. We're afraid of being abandoned by God, by our source. And of course, when I got to that point, I don't know how I'd missed it, because all of my characters were screaming, shouting at God, at Buddha, at Christ. Where the fuck were you? Where were you? And eventually I had a dialectic with God in my own head. And he said, you think I abandoned you? And I said, yeah, I did. I do think that. And he said, I didn't abandon you, but did you abandon you? And I realised I had abandoned myself. I'd abandoned myself for many years. And I realised that God is omniscient, omnipotent, he's omnipresent. It's like that sound on your gong out there. It just permeates everything, and it just keeps building up. We can't be abandoned by our source, because it is us, The Atman and the Brahman are one. The soul and God are one. This body and everything in it is one with everything. Everything is connected. And when I went through all of those layers and ticked them off one by one, it wasn't his fault, wasn't her fault, wasn't their fault. And I said to God, it was your fault. And he goes, no, not me. But maybe we can look a bit closer to home. Once I realised that, I can't tell you this overwhelming release, this expansion of consciousness. It's like I'd reclaimed something of myself, and it just filled with consciousness. And I just felt this overwhelming love for my mum. I just couldn't stop touching her. I kept pretending to throw her with my judo throws, and I just such unconditional love for my mum and for my dad and for my sister and for everybody. I suddenly realised that I'd still got things to work on, but God, writing that play, it took me to the very, very edge. On the morning the play came on, Brian, I broke my ribs in training. Everything was trying to stop me from getting to that play. Yeah. Everything was trying to stop me. I thought my agent was going to sack me. I thought my wife would be ashamed of me. She actually said to me, yeah, but these things you've written here, they didn't happen to you, did they? I'm like, you didn't do that to yourself. And I said, yeah, but I did. And that's the whole idea of writing the plays. I said, it's blackmailing me. So I've just got to stop it. I've got to bring it out.
What did your mom say?
She just said, because I asked for her to be protected, she said, what's the play about? I said, it's about a boy that was abused. I said, and his parents deny it happened. I said, it's an amalgam of lots of stories. Oh, lovely. What do you want for breakfast?
Did she see it?
No. She doesn't see my stuff. She doesn't look at it. But that's okay. She doesn't need to. Yeah. I don't want my mum to be hurt in any sense. I don't, I just love her. Everybody did their best. And my life is prolific and beautiful and expanded and articulate because that happened, not despite it. That sent me on a journey of understanding, trying to find not just knowledge, but not just understanding, but knowledge, certainty. I wanted to find certainties. I wanted to find purpose. In the Old Testament, they would call it logos. It literally means the word of God. I wanted to find something that I could be certain of. It sent me on a path, this didactic path of massive learning, and I would never have done that without that crisis. I would never have done. There's no way I would have done that. I'd have probably just been the same as everybody else. I'd have probably just stayed in the factory and talked about doing something. But I was so driven. I was maniacal with what I did, and it's led me into the most beautiful places. It's led me to this beautiful relationship I've got with Sharon. I'm able to sit here today because of that, not despite it. Yeah. So it's and because it happened, and because I went on a search to understand it into psychology, physiology, sociology, into the metaphysics, to the spiritual realms, the Budo. And I don't mean socks and sandals and dream catchers. I mean proper Budo, proper scare the shit out of you, nearly take you to insanity Budo, It took me to places that have given me real understanding, real certainty. In Islam, they call it yaqeen. It means certainty, knowledge. So knowledge is it's not like wisdom or understanding. They are the precursors to knowledge. Knowledge is a certainty that when it happens, it permeates you. It is you. You become knowledge. That's what you become. So there are certainties that I have based around some of the things I do, which are so certain that I cleave to God. I cleave to everything when I feel them. Some of the stuff I did in judo, some of the stuff I did on the door, the writing particularly.
And can we talk a little bit about, your backstory? Because we're making kind of some allusions to it, but I'd love it if you could talk about it. So you're born in Coventry, or right around there. And at some point it looked like you were going to have just kind of another typical life there.
Yeah.
And you were really suffering from some depression, which led kind of to anger and then to looking into your fears. And maybe we can just talk a little bit about that, just to kind of set the scene of who Geoff Thompson was back then. I mean, what were some of those things that kind of tripped into that evolution?
I was wanting to expand outside of the periphery of my small life. But every time I got to the periphery of it, every time I got to the edges, every time I tried to expand the borders, I was turned away by fear, by terror. I didn't realise that I had to consume that, I had to absorb that, I had to go through that. I call it the fire and thorns around the kingdom. I had to go through that, but every time I met it, I kept turning back inwards. So I had this massive creative urge, but nowhere to place it. I was suffering with periodic depression, which would literally wipe me out. It would leave me feeling terrified. And this, again, I had a young family and I was working. So
in your 20s, mid-20s?
Yeah, my mid-20s.
Okay.
I was a second
Just another bloke in Coventry
another
working,
guy
who's also...
in a factory.
Okay, in a factory, but also severely depressed,
Yeah.
not knowing what to do with it, and not having anybody to talk to about it,
Yeah.
and not having a book like yours to read about it, because no one
Nothing.
had written anything like that
No,
before.
there was nothing that I could find.
That you could relate to.
No, there's nothing there at all. Then it just, something happened. I would say this was my first communication with my soul. One day I was in the pits of depression. I just found this anger and I just thought, I'm not having this anymore. I'm not having it. I'm not putting up with this anymore. So I just decided, I just had this idea to write down everything I was afraid of and systematically confront it one by one. I drew a pyramid on a piece of paper. Again, the idea just dropped into my head like a coin falling through water. I wrote my least fear on the bottom step, my worst fear on the top step, and I systematically started to confront these fears. I started to intercourse with them. I started to call them out. And one by one, as I overcame these fears, I developed desensitization to the biology, the adrenaline. I reclaimed parts of myself. So the part where all the fears were residing, there were places they were squatters. So when I got rid of these fears, I would confront a fear and keep confronting it until the fear dissipated. So the nature of the fear would be liberated, and the effulgence, the energy that was in the fear, would come back to me. So I'd reclaim these little parts. As I started to climb the pyramid, I recognised that the fears I'd written down, spiders, fear of dentists, were kind of placeholders. They were covering deeper fears. So I was afraid of my wife. I was afraid of confrontation with my wife. I was afraid of my mother. I was afraid of any kind of confrontation. I was afraid of change. I was afraid of success. I wanted to be successful, but I was afraid of it. I was afraid of what does it mean if 1 minute you're Geoff the factory worker, then suddenly you're on Richard and Judy talking about a book you've written. What does that mean? How does that affect your family dynamic? How does it affect your friends? Not in a good way, I can tell you. You can lose 95% of your social circle just by becoming successful, because they're like, oh, people will tell you can't even speak to Geoff now that he's doing well. And they just literally make it up. They don't know how to cope with you being successful. They don't know how to cope with you breaking outside the boundaries of what they know. So I started to climb the pyramid of fears.
One of those was confrontation physically with another human.
That was the top fear.
Okay.
On the way up, I started to confront the idea that I was afraid of change. So I changed my job. I went off shift work and went on to a day job. I was afraid of standing up to my wife, so I started to stand up to my wife. I just started to get very confident. The top fear was a fear of violent confrontation. So obviously I did what anybody would do. I took a job as a nightclub bouncer in in the roughest nightclub in Europe.
That's what anybody would do.
So I took this job as a nightclub bouncer, and I just thought, I'll just do a couple of nights, I'll just confront it. My training was starting to get a bit more realistic, but I didn't really know what worked in a real fight.
Did you have some training? Had you gone to some martial arts
I was a
courses?
second dan. That's what made it worse. I was a second dan,
So
but depressed.
Had you started studying martial arts in order to confront the fear pyramid? And then when you got into martial arts, you said, if I really want to confront it, I need to go in the door.
I got into martial arts and I got a first dan and a second dan with the KUGB, which is like a very powerful Shotokan association under a NOIDA from the JKA, Japanese Karate Association. These were esteemed people, but I was still very afraid. I had all of these physical skills, but too afraid of confrontation. I had no control of my endocrine system. Other people had more control of my endocrine system than me. They could trigger my adrenaline like that and I'd feel the flight response or the freeze response and I'd be gone. So I didn't understand this. I didn't understand what worked and what didn't work. I'd got 20 masters around me all telling me different things. They can't all be right. They were all adamant and they were all really believed what they were saying. But I remember being in a fight or watching a fight in a pub when I was 15 and thinking, I was a purple belt and thinking, my karate won't fit into that. It just won't. I am not prepared for this. I don't know what it would do. This is like a cartoon fight with arms and legs coming out everywhere. And I knew even then, but I denied it. I didn't want to challenge the mores. I didn't want to challenge the norms within martial art because it was all, this is what works. We don't question the masters. It was really like some of the stuff we were being taught was like working with a horse and cart when other people were, in the rest of society, working with Ferraris,
Right, and this is before the UFC or any kind of sanctioned mixed martial arts.
Way before that,
everybody was in their little tiny area where they were the best, and then the black belt instructor, everyone would kind of, let them run the show.
Yeah.
And in that strip mall place, wherever you studied, they were the master.
Oh, yeah.
But you knew that a bouncer had a different life.
I just knew, that I hadn't got the truth. Okay. I knew that I didn't know what the truth was, even though it was right in front of me. And all of the people who I loved and esteemed weren't telling me the truth. And they weren't telling me the truth because some of them didn't know it. And some of them were afraid to look at it because they'd got like 6- and 7-figure companies that were built around something that wasn't true.
Right.
So they can't just suddenly say that's not true because their whole business, their whole life, their whole personal security was built around something that wasn't realistic. I went on the door, and the first night I did on the door, I knew what the truth was immediately. It was obvious. The environment just said, yeah, well, you can get rid of all that shit because it's not going to work here. It won't fit here. It fell off me like an old coat, and I saw immediately what worked.
Which was what?
Which was preemption. Attacking first. If you couldn't talk a situation down, if you couldn't avoid a situation, the only thing that worked consistently was to attack first. And all of the other stuff that come with that, like artifice, engaging the brain with a question, hitting certain points which would guarantee or nearly guarantee a knockout.
Nose.
Using all sorts of deception. But then when I saw that truth and I started to study the exegesis of the martial arts, looking at people like Musashi, who was I think something like a 15th century samurai or a Ronin, and he never worked with anything but preemption. We talked about this on the last show we did, the 3 preemptions. To hit before they think about hitting you, hit as they think about hitting you, hit as they twitch. So we learnt this, and it was so brutally effective that in the end you didn't want to do it because it was, it was like shooting ducks at a fairground. It was just too easy, and it was almost like you'd been given some magic. You'd got this piece of magic, so you stood in front of somebody who didn't know what you knew, which meant he was out of his depth. He was out of the fight before he even knew he was in it. I would use dialogue to engage him and then take him out of the fight with something that was so short and so effective. Sometimes people didn't know who'd hit him because it was so effective and so short. What was even bigger than that? So I got that truth and I go, well, I've got the truth. So then I spent the next 4 years knocking people out because I thought, I've got the truth. I was confident. I was arrogant. I became a bully, I would say. That's not easy to say. But I started to solve all my problems with the physical response, I was no Kissinger, I know that much.
Not just at work, but everywhere else.
Everywhere. I was getting in fights at weddings, at funerals, in road rage. I said to Sharon one day, isn't Coventry violent? Everywhere I go, there's violence. And she said, no, there's a common denominator, Geoff. It's everywhere you go. So I recognised I'd got this filter in me, this belief that the world was against me, and that the world was dangerous, and that I needed to protect myself. And this all came back from when I was abused.
Right, but you're also feeling powerful at this point, right?
I'm feeling very powerful.
You're the man. Everyone's scared of you.
Yeah.
So even though maybe you're still scared inside, no one can tell.
No one could tell.
This is the basis of your books.
Yeah, no one could tell. I didn't think they were scared of me. I thought they respected me, but they were just scared of me.
Right.
So, so I kind of built a legacy on that. But deep down inside, I knew when I got my fifth Dan. My fifth Dan was a master grade. I remember looking in the mirror and being so disappointed. Peter Considine said to me once, you get your fifth Dan, not for what you've done, but what's expected of you. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, there's no master here. Maybe there's a masturbator, but there's not a master. You know, I was addicted to sexual pornography. I was a bully. I was 4 stone overweight. I was ignorant. All I could do really was have a fight, and I thought that meant I was a master. So I had so much to do. It was so shocking to look in the mirror and see this honest reflection of this person that I didn't like.
Wow.
I was a bully in every aspect of my life, but no one would have said that I was a bully. I wouldn't have seen myself as a bully, because I still had a gentle nature and I was still kind. But if anybody triggered that old parasite, I would be posturing. I'd be very big, very big, very quickly. I bullied my wife. If I wanted to cuddle with my wife and she didn't want to cuddle, I'd slam doors and I'd, become monosyllabic and I'd give her a cold back in bed. When I realised I was bullying her, because what I was actually saying was, if you don't want sex with me, I'm just going to completely withdraw love. I couldn't believe that. So this is where I went from the exoteric training, which is the normal revealed martial arts, into the esoteric training, which is the hidden martial arts. So I started to work on these base impulses as they rose up. They call it apophatic theology in Christian mysticism. Basically, it's we don't really know what God is, but we know what He isn't. So we can find God through negation. So we can contract all of the things that God isn't, and in the process reveal who God is. Or we can find the self, the geometric point, the singularity in ourself. We can find that in ourself by getting rid of everything ostentatious, everything extraneous. So my training, all of my training then became about contraction of the ego in order to expand consciousness. And that's what in Islam they call the greater jihad. The lesser jihad is when we go out into the world and we try and fix the world, or we fight the world, or we take on the world. We buy into all of the different things going on and we go out and we try and fix it. But that's a little bit like sitting in the cinema, watching a horror film and thinking, I don't like this, and then trying to change it at the level of the screen. We know it's not going to change at the level of the screen. We've got to come back to the projector. We've got to come back to the focus. We've got to come back to the film. And that's our cognitions, our perceptions, our precepts, our truths, our beliefs. We've got to come back to them. We've got to challenge them. So that was my apophatic theology. And this is a precedent set in all of the different religions. It has different names. So it was starting to find who was via negation. So I started to find out who I wasn't, and I stopped engaging those parts of me. I stopped engaging anger. I stopped engaging violence. I stopped engaging jealousy. I stopped engaging envy, any of the vices. I just starved them. I recognized that reality existed at the level of engagement.
Did you have a moment where you said, I can no longer be this bully bouncer, Geoff Thompson, and I need to make the transition? Because many of your former coworkers probably never made that transition. Or it was made for them by going to prison or getting stabbed, or maybe they still can't figure it out.
That's very
How did
true.
you evolve? Is it your nature?
I can tell you one point. I'd been brought up a Christian, so I got a foundation of spiritual life or an inner life, but I'd lost it somewhere along the way. And I got into a fight one night. I've been in a lot of fights and I'd nearly killed a few people, more by accident than anything else, or more just because I was so aggressive. But this one particular night, I really destroyed this guy. I'd been trying to pull away from the violence. I'd been trying to avoid it. And this one particular person, ironically, was a karate guy. He was another black belt. And he just kept pushing me and pushing me. In the end, I said to him, "What's wrong with you? You got a problem with me?"
He was at the club.
This was in a pub, yeah.
Oh.
This was in a pub. He's just a guy in a pub who looked at me and took a disliking to me. I was balding. I was articulate. You know, I was soft-spoken. I got a massive reputation as a fighter, so I don't know how he got past that. He just must have thought, this, you know, I fancy this.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.